Hi, everyone. Welcome to this new episode of our Student Spotlight series, where we're able to showcase the work that our past students have been doing. I'm Daphne, one of the podcast hosts at CCIR, and today it's our pleasure to have with us Claudia. So why don't you tell us a bit about yourself, like how old you are, how long you've been with CCIR, what grade you're in, things like that.
My name is Claudia Lee, and I am currently a junior student in Shanghai, China. And um, I joined the summer session of the CCIR Future Scholar Program this year. And I joined the course How to Start a Musical Renaissance, which is directed by Dr. Wee.
Amazing, amazing. And what was your topic, your research topic?
So the research topic that I eventually settled with revolves around the industry of musical theater in China. And so the title is called Viewing the Musical Theater Industry in China. How does cultural aptness contribute to its success?
Interesting. And what do you mean by cultural aptness?
Yeah, that is actually one of the terms that I had to define at the beginning of my research. So I defined cultural aptness as the degree of how a musical fits the current values or taste for music that its audience has for its domestic audience.
Interesting. So, for example, how relevant a musical might be to the political climate or the government or the things people are currently interested in, how it fits the cultural moment in China. Is that kind of a good way of summarizing it?
Yeah, that is one of the aspects. And from another point, it's actually because musical theater is a kind of art form that originated from Western cultures. So sometimes it's like there's actually quite a big disparity between like what the Chinese audience prefer in terms of perhaps the genre of the music and like what the current famous musicals that are presenting on Broadway. So there's like quite a disparity between the styles of these famous and successful musicals and the taste of the Chinese audience.
Interesting. What are the musicals like in China? How are they
So
different?
I think for the current musicals that are performing in China, a lot of them are actually like translated versions of musicals that like are actually owned by a foreign copyright. So that is like one of the major points that I discussed in my essay, where I stated that because these musicals are they originated from another culture, many parts of like that musical, especially those regarding to the culture or like the parts that are supposed to convey humor, like are unsuccessfully conveyed in the musical when they're translated into Chinese due to like the differences within the culture and the language.
That's so interesting. Can you give like an example of that?
Mm, I think I could use one of the examples I used in my essay, which is like the all-time classic musical, The Sound of Music. Like one of the parts where Maria is supposed to teach these children of the notes do, re, mi, she associated like the pronunciation of them with memorable objects such as do, a female deer, and like re, a drop of golden sun.
Right.
However, when we translate them into Chinese, like do is not the pronunciation of a female deer in Chinese. So when the Chinese production came out, like they actually changed the meaning of the lyrics completely. For instance, when they translated doe, a deer, a female deer, they translated into doe, which is the pronunciation in Chinese is translated into together. So that line is translated into together we sing together. So I think it's actually quite interesting because despite changing the context of the song, it's still like suitable because it fits the purpose of making the song memorable and making it a catchy song so that the audience and the children in the play are able to remember these notes.
That's really interesting. Wow, I had no idea. So I'm learning about this too. That's really, really interesting. I love that musical. So that's really, really, wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I find it interesting how what you're saying is like kind of really notable how the kind of I don't even know how to describe it, like the kind of wonder and like sparkle of these lyrics like almost stays the same. Like kids still love to hear it and they love to hear this, you know, together line instead of the dear line. So you're saying it still kind of works. It still kind of works in this way where the song functions correctly to kind of, you know, she's singing Maria, it's Maria singing, right?
Mhm.
Maria is singing to everyone saying we have to come together and you know I'm going to teach you all these lyrics
Yeah.
and these sounds and you know and you're going to learn with me. But what you're saying about the humor earlier, that's the missing part because instead of a female deer, like that's like a laugh, I guess, right? But instead it's this idea of coming together, which is a bit more earnest, actually, a bit
Mhm.
less funny. So you have some of that humor, that kind of like nonsensicality missing. This nonsense
Yeah.
is missing. Yeah, interesting. And I guess the example you just brought up is based on a level of language, right?
Mhm.
Like the fact that doe sounds nothing like a female deer, like a doe in Chinese. What
Yeah.
is the word for doe? Do you know? If you don't,
Like
that's
the word for a
female
female
deer.
deer in Chinese.
Yeah.
It's like it has two syllables. It's called mu lu, and it's separate because lu is like for deer and mu is like the indication for the gender.
Right. Okay. Wow. Interesting. So that's really, really sounds nothing like a doe. So
Yeah.
you have these really innate, stark differences on the level of language, right? And I guess when your joke is about the word that's being used, you can
Mhm.
no longer make that joke because the word is different, right?
Yeah.
Um, so interesting. So how have you found that that connects to the idea of culture and cultural aptness in China versus maybe some of the ideals held in the West? How have you found that discrepancy in these musicals?
So I think that it's like for Chinese people, I think from like in terms of the taste for the music that they prefer, for instance, a lot of the musicals such as Chicago, they include musical elements of jazz, but to the Chinese audience, jazz is a like rather niche genre of music, and it's quite hard for these musicals to develop a domestic market in China because they have like a relatively limited amount of existing audience. But I think that um, there are a lot of theaters or like organizations that are trying to promote to let the Chinese audience know more about such genre of music through like hosting more performances of like jazz performances, for instance. So I think because the musical theater industry, like it's gaining quite a lot of popularity in China these years. So they're trying to like promote not only the production of original musicals, but also to like sort of blend in the cultures by introducing more foreign musicals.
Interesting. Yeah. I will say jazz, I guess, is a big part of kind of American history and like you have the Harlem Renaissance coming into contact with like Louisiana jazz. So it forms that kind of foundation of I would say when it was coming up, music that was quite taboo and sultry even. So like this idea of jazz, I think in America was very almost I mean, right now it's kind of revered as a really high art form, but when it was first introduced and it was taking over these other art forms, it was not treasured in that way. Right, it was kind of taboo almost. And yeah, it's interesting to see that I guess China hasn't had even that experience with jazz. They just don't really know much about it. Is that what you're saying? Like they're just not that experienced with it. Yeah. So I guess Chicago, which is a musical, almost I think the commentary of the musical is based around the genre of jazz and the idea of jazz as a kind of music, but also as a lifestyle, that kind of taboo lifestyle filled with alcohol and dance and late nights, right? So I think Chicago is a musical in which jazz is very much a character, isn't it? It's like jazz is one of the characters. And when you have a kind of turned down familiarity with that character, you're going to have a like smaller familiarity with the understanding of the musical as a whole, because one of the characters you don't fully grasp, right?
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So we have the kind of level of language that cultural aptness is kind of creating some dissonance. We have level of familiarity with musical genres that maybe haven't made its way to China with such a popularity yet. And I was wondering about on the level of, you were mentioning there are some newer musicals that are original, like in Chinese, right, coming up, not cultural adaptations, not Western adaptations, but new, like from China, but musical theater, right? These are the what you're saying are coming up now, right? So I was
Yeah.
wondering on the, you have language, you have musical genre familiarity. I was wondering on the level of values, how the musicals are differing and this idea of cultural aptness comes into play. Do these new musicals have different values than Western musicals, or different philosophies of life, different ways of looking at life, or are they quite similar to these Western musicals where I think a lot of the values are quite similar, to be honest, such as we have one hero going on a journey, learning something about themselves. They're going to be changed in some way. You have the Sound of Music where it's about yourself, but it's also about helping others. But ultimately, our focus is on one person or one family. Or you have musicals like Chicago where your hero falls from grace, and but it's still about that person going through their emotional headspace and what's going to happen to them. So is the structure the same? Are the values the same? I was wondering about that.
I have to say that regarding to the themes, which is like quite connected to the values, it's actually like the themes doesn't differentiate much because like the common themes revolve around like love, revolves around perhaps like a hero's journey. But I think that there are some um differences in the values. Like for instance, according to um my knowledge, there are some musicals that are quite popular on Broadway, and Chicago is one of the examples. But like it's quite hard for them to gain a domestic like group of audience in China because like some of the topics are quite prohibited here, and like there are government restrictions to them. So like I have to say that due to these cultural differences or like the values that are not promoted in China, like the music and like the art was sacrificed because like due to these differences, like the art, the musicals are not allowed to be seen by these audience at first, and that's actually quite a shame. And regarding to like the general values that these Chinese musicals um like they perform, I think that's from some extent they are less individualistic in the sense that I think many musicals like they combine the appearances of the characters like on a more evenly perspective. Whilst I think that in some like a lot of the Western musicals they focus on like this one main character and the entire story plotline revolves around that. So I think that is one of the main differences.
That's really interesting. I do think America has this kind of obsession with individuality. I've noticed this for a long time where it's kind of like, it's all about you. You can get the American dream and you can climb it. Like, there's that really stark image of Uncle Sam pointing his finger at you, right? So it's this idea about the individual, right? The singular person. And I think a
Mhm.
lot of literature and musicals reflect that value, actually,
Yeah.
because it's really, really centered on the journey of this one individual to wherever they're going in life, whether that's up or down. So I have wondered, are other countries, other cultures as well, this like obsessed with the I, the singular I, or is it more about the many? So it's kind of nice actually to hear that musicals get a wider lens on all different characters instead of just this one person. And of course, there are many American musicals as well that have really strong ensemble acts. I'm thinking like Les Miserables or even Cabaret, somewhat like that. Or Into the Woods is a very strong ensemble act. But I would say for the most part, they do kind of tend to center around one person. Yeah, interesting. So where do you think that discrepancy between the focus on the I versus the focus a bit more on the many, is there a kind of logic to that, or is it just happens to be that value, or do you know why that's come into play?
I think it's somewhat related to the history. Like, I think for through my limited knowledge of learning American history, I think that since like the beginning, the birth of this country, it signifies like the search for freedom, the search for individuality. So it's kind of ingrained in its culture as well as like, and that part is like manifested through the art that American artists produce. Whilst I think like for China, it's quite the opposite from like talking from a historical perspective. So yeah, I think that it's not something that's caused by like that's not like a phenomenon that's specific to musical theater, but I think it's manifested through like any form of art.
Interesting. Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of I guess the past always shapes the future and the present, right? So that's very interesting. Would you say there are differences on the level of structure in the musicals? Are they written differently to have like a different kind of form, or are they quite similar all around?
I think regarding to the structure, it's actually quite the same
Yeah.
because um I have also mentioned in my research paper where like a lot of the musicals that are produced in Chinese, well, like they actually hired international groups of directors, choreographers. So like it's quite obvious these um when you see like the works of Western musicals, like they're quite like influential to the domestically produced musicals because I think that we do not yet have a standardized system, whether of funding or of production, or like even of the education of musical theater for like the actors and actresses. Thus, like I believe that the musical theater industry in China is still in a stage of development where we sort of have to first rely on the cooperation and help from um, experts who have already like have experience working in a standardized system within the industry.
Interesting. So it's still kind of moving on up almost. It's still kind of formulating itself.
Mhm.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess my question then is how popular are musicals? Because I'm not familiar. Like I think in the US, they're I think honestly, musical theater is one of these genres that skyrockets in popularity for certain musicals and
Mhm.
then shoots down. Do you know what I mean? Like, whereas the film industry is always going to have a strong audience because people are always going to go to the cinema. They're always going to see their favorite stars on the silver screen. But I think musicals also in America are this kind of like niche genre almost. Like these like certain types of people go to see musicals, right? Broadway, maybe if you're in New York City, you'll have a tour, you'll have go see a Broadway show. But I think musicals around the country, um, they also I think had their heyday and then sometimes crash when everyone has seen that new, they've all seen Wicked, and then what else are they gonna see? You know what I mean? So how popular amongst the public are musicals? I guess is my first question. And how popular is pursuing a musical theater career amongst the public? Because you were saying the education and the pay is still kind of trying to find its feet. So is that a popular degree or career to choose? And how popular is it amongst the public to watch?
Yeah, so regarding its popularity amongst the public, I think that according to the research that I have done and also like my personal experience with my friends, it's quite like there is this sort of fandom culture within like the musical theater industry in China where like these fans who are already interested in musical theater like they could go to every show, they could see the same show over and over and over again, but it's actually quite hard for musical theater to generate new audience. It's like that type of art form that like it's hard for people to know about it, but once they know about it, like they get addicted to it. And regarding to the like the pursuit of being a musical actor or actress as a career, I think it's kind of it's promoted by different types of like um reality shows because previous years there is a reality show called 深入人心, and it's actually the first show that had musical actors to participate in. It's kind of like the Americans Got Talent, where they have to compete, and then at last those who actually won get the chance to go on a tour around China. So that is actually the first show that really boosted musical theater's popularity. And before that, it was really like this really niche art form in China. And afterwards, I think the popularity of pursuing being a musical actor or actress as a career like increased significantly. There are many children in China who go to these art schools, such as the Shanghai 中央戏剧学院, which is like an art school dedicated to educating actors, actresses, musical theater actresses, and singers, and etc. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Is it kind of frowned upon to pursue a career in musical theater? Because like here in the US, I feel like if you were to tell your family, Mom, Dad, I'm gonna go be a musical, I'm gonna be in musicals, I'm gonna go to Broadway, I'm gonna be in Broadway. They're gonna say, you're not gonna be in Broadway. You're not gonna make it to I'm sorry, it's so low. It's like, go get a real job. So is it like treasured? Or is it kind of more frowned upon? Do people respect it? Like,
I would say that there are like some nuances regarding people's attitude towards it because I have also participated in several like commercial shows of musicals, and when I was in middle school, I was quite determined to become a musical actress myself in the future. But my parents, like, they sort of wanted to guide me to think realistically of what um what steps do I need to take next in order to um pursue my career. And this is like one of the aspects that I researched for my essay, which is like the current circumstances or the environment for musical education in China. And I think that it's actually quite, it's sort of like it has two poles. So the first one is that you really want to like become an esteemed artist when you grow up. So like you have to dedicate a lot of time and energy and like practicing your instruments or practicing your vocals. The other pole of attitude towards becoming like an artist is that you don't have the academic skills to finish 高考, which is like the Chinese process of applying for college.
right.
So you choose to pursue an artistic career because like it's the easier way out. So it's like quite on the opposite poles. And people's attitude differ like regarding I think their education experience because some people who do not have the access to um some like the art forms, they disrespect um, they disrespect people who pursued artistic careers because they think that like that's the easier way out, like they have the money to pursue that, and that's why they have the chance to gain the success that they are now, so they see like that as a result of wealth instead of their hard work. Yeah.
Interesting. So you have that kind of almost like a privilege, if you will. Interesting. Yeah, interesting. I think it's probably quite similar in the US, to be honest, where if you make it big, everyone loves you. You're a musical theater star. If you don't make it big, everyone judges you. Why did you pursue musical theater? Right. So you have that kind of polarity as well. I'm a big fan of musicals. I've produced a lot of musicals. I work in a lot of theater. I sing as well. So I absolutely love this topic that you've chosen. I same. I love it. Interesting. So yeah, what interested you? I know you said that you initially wanted to be in musicals as well as a younger person. But what interested you in studying the cultural aptness part of this research paper? And also, had you done anything like this before, like in high school, for example?
So I've never done an individual research project before. So like CCIR is my first opportunity. And I think that the reason I settled with the idea of cultural aptness is like throughout the whole course, like Dr. Wee taught us a lot about different genres of music. Like I think I really think that like he knew everything. So like starting from the Middle Ages to Renaissance to like temporary to like the current genre of music such as like Mandopop, K-pop, or like Western pop music. Like he walked us through the cultural aspects like historical movements and the political reasons that contributed to the flourishment of different art forms. And that really inspired me to like delve deeper into my previous understanding of the musical theater industry in China. So like apart from getting to perhaps like know these songs and these musicals regarding to their plot or the music itself, I wanted to sort of dig into like how could they be so successful while other musicals like do not get enough occupancy rate and then they eventually just fade away. And yeah, so like Dr. Wee's lectures like really inspired me to eventually settle on this project.
Definitely. That's a great answer. Yeah. Yeah, how would you say that your experience with this program was? Did it challenge you? Do you feel more prepared to tackle similar projects in the future? These kinds of questions.
Yeah, I definitely feel more prepared. And I think that after this project, I gain a lot of confidence because I study in a bilingual school and I'm not an English native speaker. So actually, to be honest, at the beginning of this project, I was quite nervous because I thought like I had to be like speaking in English for like 3 hours each session. But it turns out like quite fine because sometimes when I encounter problems of expressing words that like I only know how to describe it in an abstract way. Like Dr. Wee and my other classmates, they were able to somehow um, resonate with me and understand because I think the topic that we're discussing, like this course itself, when we're talking about art, sometimes we just don't know how to describe it in a concrete way. So it's sort of like a similarity between like everyone who participated in this course. It's that we were able to like understand each other despite like having these differences in our style of speaking or our interests.
That's really nice. I like to hear that. So you kind of bounced off of your peers and they helped you and you helped them as well. That's really nice. Yeah. Do you have any tips and tricks for any upcoming CCIR students who are about to undertake a similar research paper?
I would say um, try your best to not miss any session because like I missed the first two sessions because I was um, participating in a competition. So like when I return, there were a lot of readings that I had to catch up with, and I read really, really slow. So like that was like quite a challenge for me. And I think that the workload for the CCR program is actually quite high, considering like if you have other activities whilst you're also taking this course. So I would say that the most important thing to do is to always like finish your work or like the readings that you have to do on time because they are the most reliable resources for you to learn from and to prepare you so that you're not going to walk into the next lecture and like have no idea what you're talking about.
Right, exactly. So the readings are definitely your anchor into the information in this course. Very, very good. Yeah, interesting. Okay, and then finally, my last question for you today. You know, I have to ask, what is your favorite musical?
Um, it's hard to pick only one. So like the one that I'm thinking from the top of my head, like it's six.
That is a
Yeah.
great musical. Interesting. And why say, well, of course, Cambridge Center for International Research. This musical is written by Cambridge students, actually, six, I'm sure, which I'm sure you know, was written in Cambridge by Cambridge students, eventually made it all the way to London to the West End. For anyone who doesn't know, it's about King Henry the Eighth's wives, and how they were all divorced or beheaded or met horrible fates. And this is kind of their angry response back to the public and their tale, their tale of all their lives. So why would you say six? Like what is the kind of reasoning behind that?
I think it differentiated from like the conventional structure of musical theater in the sense that it's like presented in a rock concert, sort of like that. And it's really cool because I think there is like some sense of similarity between the musical Hamilton and Six, is that they try to present a musical that is based on a historical context, which is like considered to be like textbook stuff and it's boring and all sort of that. But they incorporated music genres that are considered to be quite the opposite of boring, such as hip hop and rock and like pop music. And I think it's like a really smart way of introducing a period of history to um, the current audience, and especially a way of promoting like this musical to younger groups of audiences. And moreover, like I learned that the characters from Six, like their artistic design, such as like their dressing, their makeup, and their songs are actually like inspired by some of the um pop artists. So like that is also one of the points that interested me. For instance, I remember that Kay Howard is inspired by the singer Ariana Grande, and she is also like one of my favorite singers. So yeah, so like the combination of historical context with like really modern and popular music styles, I think that's like a really successful collaboration that really made me interested in that.
That's a great answer. I feel like it is very much a melding of two worlds almost, the like medieval ancient world and our modern world of pop and rock. So that's really cool. Thank you so much for coming today. We have run out of time, but what your research is very, very fascinating. What I've learned today is very, very interesting. And yeah, thank you so much for speaking with me. So yeah, I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for having me.